Hello, this is Dr. Tara Van Zant Stern with SSD Global Solutions, Smart, Simple Decision Making. Our company, along with ASQ Denver, are the sponsors of the Rocky Mountain Quality Consortium. You can find out more about SSD at ssdglobal.net. I'm excited to introduce to you today Dave Harry. Dave and I serve together on the board at ASQ Lean Enterprise Division. Dave is highly educated and holds an ASQ Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. He's also participated in a number of internal Lean Six Sigma programs. You can read more about Dave's awesome background at the Rocky Mountain Quality Consortium site at www.rmqc.org. Dave is speaking today on a very interesting topic, Kata, the secret sauce of the Toyota production system. Welcome, Dave. We're glad you are presenting.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Dr. Stern. It's really a pleasure to be part of the Rocky Mountain Quality Conference. Today, I'd like to start with the premise about introduction to the Toyota Kata, which I believe is the secret sauce of the Toyota production system. This is a presentation I've given a few times, and it's actually based on Mike Rother's Toyota Kata book. So let's take a look at it. Here's a little bit about me, where I grew up, where I've worked, where I've lived, what I've done, where I went to school, and what I support. And I generally support ASQ, IIE, and I'm passionate about Lean and Six Sigma. So if you downloaded the presentation, you can pick up some of my experience for the next round. Here's a visual presentation of my agenda. And I like to do this with the little clock segments. So we're going to make a case for doing something differently. We're going to talk a little about Toyota Kata. We'll talk about the improvement kata, which is abbreviated IK, and we'll also talk about the coaching kata, or CK. So you're going to see IK and CK throughout the presentation, and they will be explained, but if you see it, it stands for improvement kata and coaching kata. And then we'll talk a little bit about practicing and scientific thinking and the value of working iteratively. So let's go into it here. If you have questions, I usually can give you three possible responses. If you ask a question and I say, wow, that's really a great question, that actually means I have a slide that answers that. If I say, hey, that's a good question, that means I don't have a slide, but I do know the answer. And if I say that's an interesting question, that means I don't have a clue. And I'm really glad you asked the question, but I'll have to get back to you later. So let's get into this. Here's a little Dilbert comic on best practices. And Dilbert says, I'll teach you the best practices of companies that have nothing in common with yours. Those practices will fit your company like a foot in a glove. Close enough. So Dilbert's really spot on. So I'm going to teach you about a best practice called Kata. Unfortunately, it is not like Dilbert. It is something that really works. So who's doing well in industry? Many large US-based manufacturers use the Toyota production system or lean techniques, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. 73% of large US manufacturers actively deploy Lean Six Sigma, but only 49% of senior manufacturing executives are satisfied with their lean programs. 44% of senior executives believe their lean programs are effective, and only 5% of senior executives rate their lean programs as extremely effective. 22% of US manufacturers use neither Lean or Six Sigma methodologies. So we've got a lot of room to improve, and Six Sigma and Lean are not necessarily the only answers out there. So I go to a convention each year called KataCon, and KataCon 3 is coming up in Atlanta in February of 2018. And we've held it in Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, Florida, San Diego, and you have folks that are best-selling authors like Bruce Hamilton, Jeff Liker, Mike Rother, and a lot of really lean experts, and it's a lot of fun. So if you get a chance, take a look at going to KataCon in February in Atlanta. So what is a kata? Kata is a routine you practice. So it's a pattern that becomes an automatic habit that gives you some new skills. So take a look and focus on the word habit. We're going to help form habits, and the habits are going to actually improve our problem-solving skills. So my hypothesis is, could Kata be the secret sauce of the Toyota production system? I think it just might be. So let's take a look at the Kata and see if we can use that to be the secret sauce of our process improvement programs. Practicing foundational skills for scientific thinking, there's visible skills like lean tools, techniques that you use to improve cost, quality, and delivery. And there's less visible tools, and this is the systematic scientific way of thinking and how we use managers as teachers of that way. This is what we're going to focus on. I'm not going to focus on any lean tools, Six Sigma tools. We're going to focus on how managers think and how we can bring scientific thinking and acting into a way to forming habits so that our folks are problem solvers. And there's a link down there at the bottom to the University of Michigan Toyota Kata course link, and you can get every one of these slides also through the University of Michigan where Mike Brother works. So the IK and CK, which I defined previously, give us an easy way to practice scientific thinking. And you might say, what is scientific thinking? Well, it's based on successfully pursuing seemingly unattainable goals in complex systems. Remember, President Kennedy said, we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of this decade. And it also enables teams to make decisions close to the action and maneuver effectively. So if you use scientific thinking and Kata, which is about habit forming, you develop people with incredible problem-solving skills. The improvement Kata and the coaching Kata make a scientific thinking a skill anyone can learn by combining a simple four-step scientific pattern and a simple structured routines for practicing the pattern. Let's take a look. Scientific thinking is the intentional coordination of theory and evidence, whereby we encounter new information, we interpret it, and if warranted, we revise our understanding accordingly. This pattern is in contrast to relying on already held beliefs to explain causality. Scientific thinking gives us the ability to look beyond our preconceptions and see the world and ourselves in a truer light. So what's important about scientific thinking is it's not just whether we decide to revise our beliefs on new information, but in practicing, it helps us reshape how we think. So you're going to actually learn how to think differently and make that different thinking a habit through this presentation. Happily, humans are equipped to think about thinking, which is called metacognition, and we're able to change how we think through personal experience, practicing things. So scientific thinking is a routine of intentional coordination between what we think will happen, our theories, and what actually happens, which is the evidence, and learning from the difference. So we look at what we expect will happen and then find out what actually happened, and we learn something from it. That's the heart of the Toyota Kata system as developed by Mike Rother, and it's being used around the world as we speak. Hospitals, manufacturing, it's really taking off like fire. So here's some of the ingredients to acquiring new skills. And the brain research is very clear. One of the things that you need to do is you need to practice very frequently. So you need to practice something every day, and Kata does that. Just like your golf swing, catching baseballs, hitting balls, dancing, riding a bicycle, you don't just read about it in a book and go do it once perfect the first time. So we also introduced a thing called the Starter Kata. So it's very structured routines for beginners to practice the fundamentals. And then we have a coaching kata so that those beginners can receive some corrective feedback that'll ensure that the learners practice the right patterns. And so I've introduced the term learner. So a person that is starting kata and is the very first person when they start the improvement routine, They're called learners. So there's learners and coaches. And then fourth, there's mastery. So this is someone that actually looks over the coach's shoulder and actually helps so that you grow into getting better and better and better and better. So this is the routine that we'll follow. Frequent practice, starter kata, coaching, and mastery. So what are kata? They're deliberate practice routines. Kata, they're structured routines to practice everything deliberately, especially in the beginning. So if anyone's learned to play a guitar, you got to learn the chords. If you've learned to practice golf, there's certain tools that you can use that keeps your hands in the right position. Or if you've learned to dance, there's patterns on the floor. So these are things that are very, very fundamental, and kata typically builds on these learning fundamentals. So the scientific thinking plus kata gives us tremendous problem-solving skills. And that's what Toyota discovered. And that's what companies want to copy, but they go in and copy what Toyota did. They don't actually copy how they did it. And so we've discovered that kata is how they did it. And it develops tremendous problem solvers within your companies. So here's some examples of kata. So let's begin by practicing it this way for a while. That's the term that we use. So in kata, we start out our starter kata by practicing the problem solving in a very, very scientific, deliberate, habit-forming way. And we'll go into that a little bit more. So what are katas used for? There's the routines of the improvement kata and the coaching kata, and they're practiced to develop a scientific mindset. Just like in golf, you practice the swing and you might have a coach over your shoulder, and you practice and practice and coach and practice and coach and practice, and pretty soon you have increasing proficiency and you're one of the best golfers in the world. We're trying to make a field of problem solvers within companies. So over time, each organization can evolve the kata. It can begin to better suit and mesh with its culture, and there's not only one right kata. There's a good kata to start with, but we encourage people to develop their own kata routines as they mature and as they master it. So how long do you practice religiously? Well, you pass through 3 discrete stages. First, you start by repeating the practice routine without any modification. You get it so it's a habit. You don't think about it, you don't change it, you just follow it. Just like dancing or golfing or some other habit that you want to form, you just follow, follow, follow. And then once you have the basic patterns of once they're habitual, then you'll actually detach and understand the why behind them, and you'll start to adapt them a little bit. And after you've detached, then you become fluent. And at this stage, you actually develop your own special habits that adapt to your company. So if you're in healthcare, you may do kata towards the end a little bit different than they do in manufacturing, or they may do in an office routine. It's like riding a bike. Pretty soon it's just second nature, like the couriers in New York. They don't even think about how they're going to get around town and how they're going to get places. They don't think about pedaling. They just think about getting to the place as fast as possible. So kata are like rocket engines. They help you get started. Beginners should follow kata exactly, not deviating from them, so that the learning patterns start. But with increasing proficiency, each learner can start within limits to develop their own style. Likewise, over time, each organization can evolve. But kata are the rocket engines that help your organization get started, because they are the habit-forming parts that will launch you into higher proficiency. This is the improvement kata model, and I'll show you some handouts at the end. You can go to Mike Rother's website, you can download these, but it's a way of doing things. And if you see the numbers, you get the direction of the challenge, and then you go down to the lower left, and you grasp the current situation. Then you understand where you want to go next, and then conduct experiments to get there. I liken it to driving a car to a long distance place, like if you're driving to Denver and you know you have to go through Atlanta. So the direction is Denver, and then I say, where am I now? Well, I'm here in Florida, and I know I need to go through Atlanta. So I conduct experiments to get to Atlanta, and then I'll set another goal, which will eventually get me to Denver. And I think that routine is the secret sauce. The IK, or improvement kata, is a pattern is very similar to other models in human creative scientific process. Systems thinking, learning organizations, design thinking, creative thinking, solution-focused practice, preferred futuring, skills of inquiry, evidence-based learning. They all follow this same pattern. Where do I want to go? Where am I now? Where do I want to be next? And then you iterate towards it. It's important to point out that Toyota's success has come from striving scientifically in all of its goals, not just in eliminating waste. And then this is the secret sauce. There's also the coaching kata, or the CK, and it's a way of coaching so that you can use the master apprentice style that Toyota uses so well. It's just like any training in sports and music. You've got a coach and you've got a learner. Together, the improvement kata and the coaching kata make up a really, really powerful management approach to developing problem-solving skills. But there is a problem. No matter how good it is, just explaining a model doesn't generate new ways of thinking and acting. Hoping to create different behavior by explaining it or trying to convince people really doesn't work. So what you've got to do is you've got to take a look at the information that you need. You've got to change your habits by deliberately practicing a new routine, which over time changes how you think. So people that work in Toyota didn't come into the company and say, I'm going to be a problem solver. Over time, they became problem solvers by changing the way they think and the way they work and changing their habits. So they recognize problems immediately, stop the line, and they fix them, unlike other companies that are less mature. You wouldn't run 20 miles at the start when you started to try to run, just like the same thing with Kata. You'll do some baby steps to start with, and these are the Toyota Kata routines, the starter routines. Eventually, you develop your own way, and Toyota recognized this. So people start out as a novice, advanced beginner, then they become competent, then become proficient, and eventually become an expert. Each person may start at a different point and advance at different rates, but that's the idea, is you want to increase the proficiency of your people through scientific thinking and Toyota Kata. So there's an important role of practicing routines, and Kata also means form, and it's the way you practice routines that help you adopt new ways of acting and thinking. And this is where brain science comes in. So I've got a short video about brain science, and I'll just leave you with the link, and we won't go into it today. There's a very, very structured practice that we talk about, the starter kata. Remember, that was the number 2. And these are very, very structured practice routines. And each step in the IK model, the improvement kata model, and the coaching model also help us develop fundamental skills. So you see the improvement kata model there is to understand direction or challenge, grasp the current situation, establish the next target, and then experiment towards that target. That's the kata improvement model. So the teams work together. And so you'll have instructions for each starter kata that's free on the Toyota Kata website. And in those instructions, it'll tell you how to develop the coaching skills and the practice skills and actually learn to implement kata. This is what a kata coach and learner storyboard looks like. So you have a coaching cycle which may last about 10 minutes. You have the learner's storyboard. The storyboard is very, very important, and it's fairly structured, but it's not locked in granite. You'll have the challenge that that would be up here. You'll then take a look at your current condition analysis. You may understand what the obstacles are to your being able to meet the challenge. Uh, Define your current target conditions, where you want to go. And you'll see here the coach is actually asking the 5 coaching kata questions. So it's a very structured card that you hold in your hand, and you use that to coach the learner. They have block diagrams, run charts, and again, this whole cycle takes about 10 minutes a day, but it really makes a huge difference on how you are able to implement it. This is part of the starter kata. This is that video I mentioned about how people learn. And in the video, it just explains that people can learn new habits by practicing over and over and over, and eventually the bad habits or the old habits go away. It's a really it's an intriguing video on how people can learn new habits. So take a look at that YouTube link when you get a chance and bring it up. This is another video on how to develop habits with baby steps, and I won't play this one also, but this one is by BJ Fogg, and he actually learned to do 50 push-ups a day, and he started out very, very small by doing 2 push-ups at a certain event, and then he did 2 push-ups every time that event happened, and then he did 4 push-ups, and eventually he surprised himself. He was routinely doing 50 push-ups a day, and it was just by changing one small habit. So I'll give you a little bait and tell you to take a look at that video. It's only about 4 minutes and it's excellent. So here's some quick definitions to repeat. The improvement kata is a set of practice routines for learning to work scientifically when you pursue goals in complex systems. And we use a teachable 4-step model that I showed you earlier as the scientific way of thinking and acting to adopt the improvement kata. The coaching kata is a practice routine for teaching the improvement kata, and it's a pattern for teaching the improvement kata. So the improvement kata, as you see up above, and we've talked about a little bit early, is a model of the human creative process. It's a 4-step pattern for establishing conditions, and then we work iteratively or scientifically through the obstacles by learning from them and adapting based on what we've learned. So a really important part of the improvement kata is to experiment, learn from your experience, and then iteratively try new experience so that you're always working towards the goal. The coaching kata is a pattern for managers to follow in teaching the improvement kata on a daily work basis. It also becomes part of the organizational culture. So in organizations that I've seen that are actually practicing kata, you might have the CEO or the operations manager, a VP or a director actually down on the floor doing coaching to team supervisors. And it's really powerful when you have them going to the Gemba on a daily basis and actually helping to make improvements with their team. Here's the 4 steps in the improvement kata model. Understand the direction or challenge. Grasp the current condition, set the next target condition, and then iterate through the obstacles towards that condition. And of course, once you reach the next target condition, you will set additional challenges and move on through it. So again, set the challenge, see where you are now, understand the next target condition, and then iterate through the obstacles. And those are the experiments. What's really important about kata is there's no fear of failure. There's no blaming that goes on. There's little risk. The experiments are very, very small, and people iterate towards them and they learn from them. And as you know, we learn from our failures. And in kata, people are encouraged to fail so they can learn. Remember, it's a systematic way of working. So the kata will actually be an improvement pattern that you will follow throughout your presentations and throughout your process improvement skills. Again, identify the challenge, identify the current condition of where you are now, um, look at the next target condition. It's never all the way to the challenge. Remember, if we're going to Denver, we're going to first find out how to get to Atlanta, and then we're going to see where the roadblocks are, see where there's traffic congestion, and we're going to iterate towards Atlanta, and then after we get to Atlanta, we'll figure out another interim target. Again, this is what the little kids did. This diagram was done on one of our presentations recently, but it's the same thing. You want to know where you're going, you know where you are now, you do a bunch of experiments, and it's awesome. Test, 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 test. So the improvement kata and the coaching kata together is a methodology for developing people to meet challenges. So the learners are the ones that are on the shop floor that are actually supervising, and they're conducting the experiments. The coach may be a manager, it may be a learner who has actually grown up in the organization and is now coaching other groups, but you work through it. So again, you understand the situation and you iterate towards it. Again, each one of these things are frames that you can build on. So if you understand the direction or challenge, that sets the frame or the stage for grasping the current situation, which actually frames or stages establishing the next target, which actually helps you decide which experiments to do. So again, it's iterative, and you have to do all four in order to actually conduct the experiment. Here's the linkage between strategy and execution. So your company may have a 3-year goal or a vision, and that vision may be decomposed down to the several challenges or interim steps that you want to achieve in a year. And then you've got the execution, which is actually looking at the challenge, the current condition, the obstacles, and the next target condition. So the leaders in the organization are focused on the strategy part, and the managers are focused on the execution part, and they overlap at the challenge. Here's some terminology. We're going to introduce threshold of knowledge, obstacles, the experiments. In this case, the threshold of knowledge, you don't always know everything you need to get to the next target condition. And what's important is that you stretch beyond your threshold of knowledge and you try to go a little bit farther than where you actually know how to get to. So if I'm driving to Atlanta, I may end up being a stretch because I don't know what's happening around Macon, Georgia. But I do know that the road is clear between here and maybe North Florida. So you do experiments, but I'm going to try and get further, and I will find out, work beyond my threshold of knowledge. So step 1, understand the direction and challenge. Step 2, my current condition. Step 3, my next target condition. Step 4, I'm going to do the experiments, and I'm going to identify obstacles. It's important in the kata to keep track of those obstacles and actually bring those obstacles up to senior management and ask them to help you break down the barriers of those obstacles. So what's really powerful about kata is that you identify those barriers and you work to overcome those obstacles and barriers. This is the improvement kata cards. So you download these from Mike Brothers' website, and you print them out and cut them in 4s, and you have a front and a back with the questions on the back. But it really is important to have these so that people can understand how they're moving towards their goals and their challenges. The IK and CK pattern are practiced at all levels, and actually one feeds off another. So at the strategic or organizational level, you may end up having the next target condition, which actually is the challenge for the value stream, and the future state at the value stream may be the direction or challenge at the process level. And the learner or coach will actually help the team understand these longer cycle experiments and the shorter cycle experiments that are handled by the learners at the process level. Many of you have probably already seen the book Learning to See, and that's also written by Mike Rother. But value stream mapping plays a big role in the future state when we're talking about the Toyota Kata. So value stream mapping actually helps frame grasping the current situation and what direction we should end up going. This is the main intended role for the value stream mapping. So you might have process team A, and process team A may contribute to a target condition and a next target condition that might be a challenge. Typically the challenge is 6 months to a 3-year time frame. So that's long range goals. And that would appear in the value stream for the organization. But you might have team B over here that's working on a target condition and a next target condition that would also feed in that 3-year time frame goal. And team C may work on it and also have a next target condition. These 3 next target conditions actually fit into the organization's 3-year goals, which actually supports Hoshin Conry and their quality policy deployment. So it's a deliberate practice. It's linked to Plan, Do, Check, Act, and I'll show you that. It's a very do, feedback, adjust. So it's practice designed specifically to improve performance over time. That involves continual evaluation of your weaknesses and target specific weaknesses rather than repeatedly doing what you already know how to do. And it requires a coach, someone to observe and provide specific feedback on your current performance. This is very, very important because in the Plan, Do, Check, Act and the feedback loop, you have to have someone independent that actually can give you honest feedback on your current condition and how you're doing towards meeting your goals. It's one where you don't move on to the next part of the routine until you're actually learning from the master and you're part of what you're currently working on. So there's a strong feedback loop that you have to master a certain set of skills before you move on to another set of skills. So we actually use the best learners to become initial coaches, and then the best coaches to become master coaches or second coaches. It's really important. So here's a little bit about skill development basics. Any complex performance requires skills. We develop the skills through what? Through practice. Long time gaps between practice sessions diminishes the effectiveness of practice. Daily seems to be a very, very good frequency. We're not very good at self-feedback so that we can understand where we're deviating from good practices. So think about it. What if you only play golf once a year? You probably wouldn't get better. But if you practice every 6 months, you might get better. But if you practice daily or weekly and you had someone actually looking at your swing and seeing how you're doing and giving you some feedback, that's how you would actually develop those skills. So why would we use Kata for continuous improvement? Well, continuous means that it's, in many minds, it's engaged in improving the process. And the daily cycles of experimentation are very, very important. Yet our existing work routines very, very rarely include improvement. So by systematically and scientifically improving the process, it's a very, very complex skill set. So if you combine the systematic scientific improvement learning through the deliberate practice of the improvement Kata routines, you really, really are able to hone your practice or your problem solving skills and get much, much better. So the IK and CK includes practice routines, the very, very structured routines. This is how you build on the improvement capability of your organization. So you're going to see organizations like Ingersoll Rand, Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis, Aerojet Rocketdyne. They use Toyota Kata, and they've got people down on the floor doing the Kata routines, and you might have some very senior people down on the shop floor doing daily coaching cycles, and they are improving everything every day without having to do massive green belt or black belt projects. So a team or organization pursuing continuous improvement will do well to use some structured practice routines like Kata for developing the new behaviors, habits, and culture, especially at the beginning. Those of us who actually practice Lean Six Sigma know how important it is to enable the cultural change, and that it's not all about the tools, it's about the culture. And having a daily improvement and coaching kata routine really changes the culture and makes it stick. So you practice the fundamentals with basic principles using the IK model, and you do the daily practice routines. The learner actually responds to the coach and goes through a 5-question card that the coach asks them questions, and then you build on that. And things happen generally within about 2 weeks. It takes about maybe 1 week to 2 weeks to actually reach some of the interim goals, and the experimenting happens on a daily basis. So the improvement kata and the coaching kata have a starter practice routines that help develop anyone's scientific skills. These are available online. It's really, really important that you start with the starter routine and work through. Just as in music, sports, and other complex skills, you begin by practicing some fundamental skills until the pattern becomes somewhat routine, and then you can move beyond the rigid practicing to develop your own style and your own sound of music that you're making. But basically, you have to start with the routine skills. So the Toyota Kata and research approach is to use the model, and the model is actually presenting those 5 or 4 steps, and then have a structured starter practice routine. So this is what you do at the very, very beginning. Everybody doesn't start in the middle. Some people don't start at the end. They all start with a basic starter kata. And that's a very, very specific structured training drills to develop the routines. And then later on, you're able to develop organization structure routines. As your proficiency increases, organizations can move away from the Toyota Kata starter routine into more complex routines. So we'll go through some of that. Since the path to the challenge cannot be predicted with exactness, remember we have those unknown areas and portions where we don't know what the answer is. Like a scientist, the process takes scientific process to find the path through. And so you actually come up with hypotheses, you test them through experimentation, and you actually learn from results. The trick to making effective progress towards a goal is to try not to decide the way forward, but have your team iterate its way forward as you're experimenting as cheaply and as rapidly as possible. This is the baby steps. This is the innovation. This is the teaching that gets kata and separates it from the green belt projects and the black belt projects and the lengthy projects. It's a daily routine, and people are experimenting and innovating, and this practice can be taught. So it's a learning cycle. You make a prediction, and it must be testable. Then you actually take action to test it. You collect evidence and facts to actually prove or disprove that your prediction would hold, and then you evaluate and adjust on what you learn. So this same process is like the plan, do, check, act. You make a prediction. The learner predicts what's going to happen. He actually executes that with some action and does an experiment. He checks to see what he's learned, and then he evaluates what his next step is. It goes through the plan, do, check, act, or the plan, do, study, act routine, and it certainly follows the most basic lean principles. The core of dynamic lean thinking is that it's dynamic. So again, like we've talked about in the beginning, there's things that we expect to happen, and then we actually see what actually happens through the experiment. And if the experiment is done right, the little small failures actually provide some learning and insight. So we actually celebrate the failures because they provide the learning. If you know exactly what's going to happen, and it does happen, there might not be as much learning as if you actually have some failures. And so we learn by our failures, and there's no punishment for failing. Again, the experimenting zone, you stretch beyond what your knowledge, your threshold of knowledge is. An effective pattern for kata, actually you experiment beyond what you know, and you use your brain, not your wallet, and you do small experiments within this boundary. This is called the gray area. And this gray area is beyond your threshold of current knowledge, and you try and do an experiment into the unknown, where there may be some obstacles and the path may not be as evident. So you got this predictable zone, and it's where you know exactly what's going to happen. And we want the learners to actually stretch out and experiment into the unpredictable zone so that they will learn and be able to adjust. Why? Because you never know how for sure how you're going to get there until you actually get there. And you may run into some roadblocks. So we want you to actually test in the unpredictable or the learning zone. And that's what's so important about kata, is to make sure that the learners are experimenting beyond what they know for a fact. So they develop hypotheses, they test them, and they learn from them. This is a great video by Dr. Jeffrey Liker, and Jeff Liker is a really important individual in both Lean and Six Sigma. But if you get a chance, take a look at the short 2-minute video that Jeff Liker has put together about the learning zone and the unpredictability of the learning zone and how important it is to use this in everyday thinking. And Jeff Liker is a strong proponent of Toyota Kata. He and Mike Rother often appear on stage together at Toyota Kata events. Here's the thing that I was telling about, the threshold of uncertainty. You know, the threshold of knowledge, you know everything that's going to happen in that green zone. There's a danger zone. If you try to experiment too far out from what could happen, you're in the danger zone. But what we want you to do is learn new skills and habits so that you actually try things in the learning zone, which is beyond your threshold of knowledge. This is just a way to depict that, show so that people don't only experiment with the things that they know that's going to work, but they try experiments that may fail because that's where they'll learn. The coach should encourage and get the learner to practice beyond their current threshold of knowledge and skill. And in other words, the coach is responsible for the learner's success. So if we see a learner or doing his improvement kata and he's not stretching, we'll try and get him to actually look beyond what he knows and actually delve into the learning zone so that we are sure that he will be learning on new challenges and actually learning from his experiments. So what should you do at the threshold of knowledge? Well, you acknowledge, this is all I know. You know, it's difficult to do, but you got to say, hey, I only know this much. And then stop and see further by conducting an experiment. Don't deliberate over the answers. Just try the next experiment beyond what you know. And then you have a coach that's looking over your shoulder, and they'll make sure that you are staying safe and you're not being too risky. But the coach wants you to learn from it. So the coach will ask questions like, well, you don't know that? Well, how can we find that out? What experiment could you do to find out if that is really a factor? And the coach will lead the learner to beyond the threshold of knowledge. Again, it's through rapid, small experiments that advances our knowledge very quickly. So if you know the current condition and there's a gray zone where it's unknown and you don't know what's going to happen there, we encourage you to experiment in that gray zone so that you can stretch your knowledge, so that you can experiment quickly and learn from them. And so again, there's a daily cycle that Toyota Kata goes through. There's another important video, and you guys have probably seen the Marshmallow Challenge, but this is an excellent video. It's only about 3 minutes, but it's about kindergartners and how they rise to a challenge of taking 20 pieces of spaghetti and 1 marshmallow and a couple pieces of tape and try and make the largest tower they can, and how little kids learn iteratively, and it's really tough for adults to learn iteratively. So Adults would experiment one time with one big experiment at the end, but these little kids in kindergarten, they try and try and try, and they'll do 20 experiments trying to get the tallest thing, and they're absolutely practicing kata. So practicing the improvement kata teaches scientific thinking. It's deliberate practice, deliberate using your skills and thinking beyond your threshold of knowledge. That's the kata part. The automatic fundamentals are there applied with all kinds of creativity so that you can achieve what seems totally impossible. That's the improvisation and creativity part. So again, Toyota Kata combines scientific thinking with habit forming and actually stretching beyond what you know so that your teams actually do improvisation and creativity. There's different levels of skill when we talk about any development area, but you can become aware of it. These are concepts and information that don't necessarily change anything, but I know about it. And then we want people to actually be able to do it. So the skill development starts here, and the learning when you practice something like doing Toyota Kata in the workplace, you become better at understanding it. And then what we want to get to is beyond just understanding it, being able to teach it. So this is where the coaches are born. So in a learning organization, the improvement kata and the coaching kata work hand in hand so that the organization first becomes aware of it, then they're able to do it, and then they're able to teach it. And here's a roadmap on how you're able to do it. The learning progression is to make your employees aware of kata and then actually practice doing it and then actually developing others so that they can actually teach it. So a roadmap might be something like having a learner storyboard with a learner and having a coach come in there as the first coach and then another coach come in to actually develop the coaches. And this is a really good pattern for how the organization works. These are not hierarchical roles. A learner could be a very, very senior person in the company, and a coach could be a mid-level person or maybe a lean expert. But it's not based on your roles, it's based on your understanding of Toyota Kata. And here's a roadmap if you want to, if you talk to a consultant, what they would do is they would tell you in phase one, you would understand the subject. In phase two, you might form some kind of advanced group, and the advanced group may come in and do some coaching for the improvement kata folks. And then the advanced group may conduct some bi-weekly training and reflections. And then you may want to do slices or waves. So you might have one group, in one area or a department or a value stream loop, and you try using kata there, and you might want to do it in another department and another department and another department. And pretty soon you've actually rolled out a kata deployment throughout your site. So this is a rollout model of how kata would roll out in an organization. This is what the learner storyboard looks like. And these are fairly cheap poster boards. Sometimes you'll just use white paper and use some masking tape to make the lines and use a magic marker to put the areas on. And then people actually just use tape and plain paper to put the information in the target condition, current condition, the PDA cycles, and the obstacles parking lot. Very, very simple. Here's a template for a board if you want to make one. And the 5 questions are downloadable from Mike Rother's website. You download these, and these actually, you print them two-sided, you cut them up, and those are your 5 questions. It starts with what is your target condition, what is the actual condition now, and you turn the card over if you've actually had a last step. It says, what did you learn? What did you plan on the last step? What did you expect on the last step? What actually happened on the last step? And then what did you learn? After that, you talk about the obstacles. So here's where you bring in senior management. what's preventing you from actually achieving your goals in the target condition? Which one obstacle do you want to address next? So again, it's an experiment just on a small scale to overcome one obstacle. What's your next step? And then how quickly can I come back and see how you're progressing? Can I come back tomorrow? Can I come back in 2 days? So it's a very, very strong and iterative planning progression. This is the PDA cycles record. So you do one experiment. What did you expect? What happened? What did you learn? And you keep a record of that and put it on your learner board. And one record at a time, you're able to see exactly how you're progressing. And this is something that both the coach and the learner discuss. So you use the 5-question dialogue, which is used by the coach, and you use the rapid PDA cycles record, which is used by the learner. And using those two things together, they're able to come up with a tremendous progress on a daily basis on improving things within the organization. These are used together. You ask the 5 questions at each step. So the coach will ask those 5 questions exactly as they are from the card at each step, and the learner will go through his cycle record, his Kata cycle record, and answer those questions, and then start a new cycle. And each one of those cycles moves you closer to the target condition, and each one moves the organization into a learning organization and a problem-solving organization. And this is a case example. We don't have time to show it now, but I encourage you to go in and actually look at a very, very detailed improvement kata coaching session here at this YouTube. And this is again from Mike Rother. So we want to do Toyota Kata. Every step is an experiment. And I think that Toyota Kata or Kata could be the secret sauce of the Toyota production system. And I think that if organizations embrace Toyota Kata, they will be able to perform just about the same as Toyota, but they won't have copied Toyota. They would have copied the way Toyota does things. It's the secret sauce. So with that, we'll release the Kata. If you have any questions, you can reach me at my email address. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can follow me on Twitter. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak at the Rocky Mountain Quality Conference. And I thank Dr. Stern for including me in the agenda. And I hope that you guys go forward and actually practice Toyota Kata. Thank you.